Hi, in this video we're going to extend our drag 2D script to limit the movement of the objects to the screen like this. I'll go through the two methods we used to create it in the last video and show how we can add on this extra functionality. Let's get started. If you haven't seen the first video, the setup for this is very simple. In my scene, I've got 4 coloured squares. These are just standard sprites. The only thing I've changed is that I've added a new layer called Movable to which they're all assigned. And you can see that in the top right here. I also have a hexagon. This isn't in the movable layer. Then I have a drag manager object. This just contains the DragAll script. And the movable layer parameter is set to our movable layer. As you can see, if we start Unity, I can move all the squares, but I can't move the hexagon because it isn't in the layer. However, the squares can all be moved off the screen. If you have a puzzle game or something like that, this is probably unwanted behavior. So what I'll do back in Unity is to create a new DragAllRestricted script. So here I've copied in all the DragAll code, which I'll quickly run through. All the logic is in the update script. We detect the left button being pressed with get mouse button down and passing in 0. When we do, we send out a raycast using the camera's screen to world point function to change our mouse position into a world position. Vector 2.0 sends it straight into the screen, and we keep going. The fourth parameter is the layer mask, and we've got that set to our movable layers parameter. When we hit something, we set our dragging variable to the transform of the object we hit, and we record the mouse offset. When we release the button, we reset our transform to null. Then, whenever we have an object to drag, each frame we update it to the new position, which is simply the new position of the mouse plus the original offset. So the first thing we'll do is to add a boolean which you can set in the inspector called isMoveRestrictedToScreen. We'll use this to toggle on or off the new functionality. We need to know how big the sprite is we've clicked in order to limit where we can drag it to. So after we've got the object and position, we'll also get this. We use getComponent to find the sprite renderer component, which we take the sprite from. Then we get the bounds, which gives us information about how big the sprite is. Then there is a helpful property called extents. This is half the size, which is exactly what we want. This is because the center is what we're moving, and we need to restrict where we can go in the X and Y axis to half the size of the sprite. We'll save this into a new vector 3 called extents. Now we've got that, in the dragging portion, before setting the position, we add an if statement to catch the case where we want to limit the movement to the screen using our variable. Then we need to know where the edges are so we can stop the drag. To do this, we can use the helpful function on the camera called viewport to world point. The viewport is always 0, 0 in the bottom left and 1, 1 in the top right. So we can pass in vector 3.1 to get the top right and vector 3.0 to get the bottom left. We do this in the update loop rather than caching it because your game may move the camera. But if it's static, you could optimize this by only doing it once. Now we've got this, to limit the x-axis going off the left or right, we can use the clamp function. The first argument is your input, so your x position. Then we want the minimum value. This will be our x position for the left of the screen plus the x position of the extents. This works because we want to stop the sprite's center moving at the point which is half of its width before it reaches the edge. For the right of the screen, we subtract off the x position of the extents. Exactly the same process for the y value of the position using the y coordinates of these functions. That's it. Back in Unity, we can drag on this new script to our drag manager and disable the other one. When we enter play mode, we can drag all of the squares off the screen as before. However, now if I check the restriction property in the inspector, they are not able to be dragged off. If you are using the individual drag.cs script, which we also made in that last episode, then the same changes can be made. This version is used when we want to add the script to each object we want to be draggable. When we click on it, we record our offset and set dragging to true. And when we let go, we stop. Again, the update method just sets the position each frame. So again, we can add our boolean to enable us to toggle the limiting to our screen functionality. This time, As the sprite is unlikely to change on our object, we can record our extents in the start method. Then, in update, exactly the same code as before. If we're restricting the movement, we get the screen bounds in world space, and clamp the new position to within this, taking into account the size of our sprite. Just to prove this works, we'll add it to our hexagon, and you can see in play mode that we can drag it off the screen, but then enabling our restriction property, we are limited to the screen just as before. This extension to the drag script was suggested by a comment on the previous video, so please do leave any comments or suggestions, as I do read them all. I hope you found this useful in some way. As ever, the full code is on GitHub and linked in the description below. See you next time.